This box is your thinking capacity. And this is your brain when you are trying to focus on that important task. As you can see, there are still thoughts running about the previous thing you were doing. There's thoughts about that meeting at 2 p.m. You are thinking about the argument you had last week. And poof, suddenly a thought pops into your mind. I still gotta buy pasta on my way back home from work. And maybe there's even that part of your brain that's just empty and just spinning around like that computer program that is completely frozen. And then you have all the random thoughts and distractions running in your mind. Maybe you even have a random tree, because I don't even know why that thing is over there on the board. And if this introduction sounds exhausting and complicated, complex, welcome to the workings of your mind. So what I want to do in this video is three things. First of all, I'm going to cover why this overwhelm happens, because of the space that is unfilled within your mind. I'm going to talk about multiple paths and multitasking the right way, because 99% of people completely have this the wrong way. And thirdly, I'm going to tell you what to do about those intrusive internal thoughts so that you can actually focus on the things that matter to you. And that is, whoops, that was my board, this important task over here. So these are some insights from this book, Focus on Off. This is actually the Dutch version, but there is an English version as well of this. And this has gotten me some insights as to why I find it so hard to concentrate personally. And we're going to cover those today. So let me toss that to the side. Please don't share this video with any book lovers. They're going to kill me. But let's move with the first thing. You can think of your thinking brain as a box. Oh my God. Okay, that works. So this is your thinking capacity. The prefrontal cortex, as we call it. The thinking part of your brain. Now, what happens is that some people get distracted more easily than others. The variety in there is actually our intelligence. So I've got two boxes here. Less intelligent person, more intelligent person. The difference is basically the size of our thinking capacity. Now, what our mind wants to do is it wants to always fill up 100% of these boxes. Now, here's the problem. Let's say that there is a certain task that you're working on. And over here, it's like this. So what is this? Let's just call it 50% for the sake of it. For this person, the same task is like this. And it's more like, I don't know, looks like 22, right? The exact number doesn't matter. Now what you're going to see here is that this thing, our mind still has the same goal. So with this task, there is 50% room for distractions. Over here, there is 78% of room for distractions. So this is the reason, this is what I discovered about myself. I am fairly highly intellectual, and so this box for me is quite big. I remember as an example of this, that Elon Musk shared in an interview that he would not wish his brain upon anyone. Because Elon's is probably like over there. Like, I don't give a flying fuck whether you like the guy or not. We cannot deny that he's not intelligent. So for him, this box is so huge that he is constantly getting, he calls it like a whirlwind of thoughts, of ideas. All because the task he's working on takes up a small percentage and his mind wants to fill the rest. So with this 50%, this 78%, what you get is all of the things here. You get random thoughts about things you did the last day, other projects you're working on, etc, etc, etc. So, with that said, what can we do about this? The first thing that really helps is to give this video a quick thumbs up for the YouTube algorithm, and then we talk about expanding this part. Let me actually erase a few things here. Right now we have our Elon-sized thinking capacity, and we have our task. The first thing you can do to improve your focus and your productivity is to make sure this task takes up a bigger percentage of your capacity. So if this would be like normal, what if you could make it like this? So the more you can fill this space with the actual task, the less space there's left over for all of this garbage. So how do you fill up this space? There are a few things you can do right now. That is number one. Frickin' thing. So basically what you can do is you can make it more challenging. So for example, if you are writing a report or you're writing a blog post, can you focus on how can I include some humor into this? How can I write it with only short sentences? The more constraints you can put on yourself of I need to write this report, but I have these side quests as well. The more you can do that, the more challenging this task becomes and the bigger this filled up space is, so that you have less room for distractions. Second thing would be a speed constraint. Basically what it sounds like. If this video right now is kind of boring, right? And you will find yourself that you're getting all of these things here. Number one, please let me know what I can do better. But secondly, that's also a thing that you can just adjust the speed on YouTube. For example, if you listen to this on 1.5 or 2 times the speed, you get more words per second in terms of information. And because of that, your mind needs to spend more time processing this. I do this, for example, with reading, where I just let my eyes glide over the text faster and faster and faster, so that I need more of my brain power to understand what I'm reading. And the faster I go, ironically, the less I get distracted. Because this thing becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. So you can do it with speed, and then give yourself a time constraint. I have such terrible handwriting. There, time. So if you know, for example, that a task normally takes you like 30 or 35 minutes, try to set a timer and say, I'm going to do it in 27. Because this forces you to work more concentrated and you feel some pressure. This, by the way, also has to do, as a side note, with Parkinson's law, which if you give yourself 2 weeks for a certain task, it's probably going to take you 2 weeks. If you say, I've got this done by the end of the week, it's probably going to take you until then. If you say, I'm going to have this done by the end of tomorrow, it's going to be done by then. Because most of the time, our effort is like this. Right? It's almost like a heartbeat, where just before a deadline, we put in most of the work. And if you want to avoid that, just make more deadlines and that are spaced like shorter together. That's a side note, but you can do this on a micro level with giving yourself a certain time deadline for a task. So with these, what you're going to do is hopefully you get to a point over here where maybe like 60% or 70% is filled with the task. Oh, and one thing I'm forgetting is you can add something like music. I've always worked way better with music than without. But it wasn't until I read the book that I tossed over there that I figured out why that is the case. The thing is, with music, what you're doing is maybe you're filling this part. Maybe another 10%, or maybe another like 20. Right? You are filling up more of your thinking capacity because the music is still being processed at the same time as you're working. And as a pro tip for this, do this with songs and mixes that you've listened to a dozen times before, or something that doesn't have any lyrics. Because if you are constantly thinking about what is being said, with for example a new song of your favorite artist, you are listening intently to the lyrics of that song. But now that takes your conscious effort. And now this 20% starts to overtake the main task you're working on. So do this with songs that you already know. And it's going to fill up more of your space, and you will get distracted by this garbage less and less. So that's the first thing out of the way. Let's go to the multiple paths you can take. And this has to do with multitasking effectively. Keyword effectively. Because what most people are doing is not multitasking at all. You can, as I'm erasing some stuff here, while hopefully not overthrowing my board, you can think of this as multiple paths. So true multitasking is where you are walking on both lines simultaneously. What most people think is multitasking actually looks more like this. So it's like this: shift, 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 shift. Forgive my terrible handwriting, by the way. But here's the problem. Most people think that this orange line of what we call switch tasking is actually the same as multitasking. It is not. So the way you can visualize this is maybe someone is having a conversation on the phone, and at the same time they're looking up things about the things they're discussing. So on Google, or maybe someone is checking their email at the same time, or maybe responding to a text. And there are so many things that we do like that, right? You check your email like this, and you go back. And you check the other screen for the information like this. And this switch might take like a second. But because you are switching between tasks, your mind has way less focus. Because again, you've got the important task, you've got the previous task. Because once you go from one thing to another thing, what happens is that part of your mind is having some residue of the previous thing. So the more you switch from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, the more of every task is still on your mind. And it's filling up this capacity. So now you have to inverse of what we just talked about. You have a lot of your mind space being taken up by all of the previous tasks and the other projects, rather than the thing you want to focus on. So what does true multitasking like this mean? I'll give you an example of what that looks like. For example, just before this, I recorded an audio lesson for my newsletter. And what I did was I had my phone in my hand, I'm talking, and I'm just pacing around the room. Because walking does not require my focus, my effort. You don't need to consciously think, now I'm going to lift up my right foot, move it forward, put it down again. And now I'm going to lift up my left foot, put it forward, put it down again. Right? It just happens automatically. So when you can do things simultaneously, where one thing has your focus, and that is to say your conscious effort that you need to concentrate on, and the other one is automatic. Now you can do things at the same time. For example, if you're listening to this while you are cleaning, for example, and you have earphones in, that is an example of multitasking. Because you don't need your conscious effort to vacuum, right? It just happens. You've done the motion so many times that it's an automatic behavior. In that case, it works. If you are cleaning something specific and you need to be highly precise about the the way you polish something or whatever. I am obviously a cleaning expert, right? But if you need to highly focus on something, now you notice that what you're listening to, you can take in all of the words. I have the same experience, for example, when I go outside and I have my earphones in and I'm walking around. I can follow the entire conversation on 2 times the speed. However, once I get to a busy crossing, and now I need to look around for cars and other pedestrians, other cyclists, whatever, right? I need to check my environment. Now I notice that after I cross the street, I'm like, what did I listen to the last 30 seconds? Because my focus, my attention was somewhere else. So I was switching from listening while walking at the same time to paying attention to them just continuing the conversation, then paying attention some more, looking around, and I'm going between those two things. And because of that, I can't properly focus because my other behavior of walking is not on autopilot anymore. Does that make sense? So with multitasking, what you would do is find something you can do that does not require your focus. Like I said before, with music, this has this exact same effect because you can be listening. If it's something you're really familiar with, you can even just find yourself singing along without even realizing it. Or you can find yourself just tapping your foot like that along with the music or you're just going like that while you're working, right? That's what happens when you get into the zone of having music on. But it's doing the same thing. You're automatically jamming along to the music while you have more of your processing power over for the main task. So that's something to experiment with. Other things, maybe in some cases, if you don't need your hands, you can be idly like doodling, right? You're just drawing random stuff, a random tree. That can work as well. But again, if you need to pay a lot of close attention to what you're drawing, the effect is gone. Because now you're going from the task to drawing, to the task, to drawing, to task, drawing, task. Right? It doesn't work anymore. So if you can do it like idle-minded, that's a great thing. So one final thing on multitasking before we go to the third thing is the following. If you can recognize that you have been multitasking, like you've been doing these two things at the same time, you have not been multitasking, you have been doing this thing. Because this truly happens unconsciously. So you're not saying, well, I've been multitasking because I've been doing my emails while singing along to like Taylor Swift or whatever, right? You don't recognize that as multitasking. But like, yeah, I've been multitasking because I've been doing my email and my text messages and I've been looking up information for this project all at the same time. No, you went from task to task, right? So once you can recognize you're multitasking, you're not multitasking. And with that said, that's the second focus problem out of the way. And by the way, as a reminder, what you're doing with this is that this is automatic, but it still fills up part of this box over here. So that, again, less room for all of these things. And the third and final thing is your intrusive thoughts. An example of this would be your to-do list, or you need to buy some groceries on the way back, or some of those things. What happens here is that your mind, your subconscious, it wants to be helpful to you, which is more than can be said from any government organization, but that's another point entirely. What this means is that your mind is not trying to annoy you when you're trying to focus over here. Your mind is reminding you of, hey, there's these other things that need to be done as well. So what you can do is very simple. You have a pen, you have a piece of paper nearby when you're concentrating, and when this thought pops into your mind of, I need to do X, Y, and Z, simply write it down. Because this, it closes the loop. There's the Zeiniger effect, I believe. A Russian scientist found the following. Have you ever had a waiter or waitress who's just standing there, arms behind his back, taking the order for 7 people? And you're like, aren't you writing this down? Like, you cannot be able to just concentrate on the entire order. But then they bring back everything is perfect, and they didn't write a single thing down. Now, what this scientist found is that people are great at remembering things until an order is settled. After that, it's like magically, poof, out of the mind, right? So 100% retaining of information while there is what we call an open loop. And it goes down to almost 0 once the loop is closed. So when you're writing things down, you make use of this Zeiniger effect by closing the loops. Your mind has an open loop of, I need to do X, Y, and Z. And it keeps reminding you over and over and over and over again, like a broken record, until you have done the thing, or until you've closed the loop. Because once you just go and you scribble down, I need to do this, or I need to do this, or this, right? That actually is not much different from my usual handwriting, but that aside. But once you write it down, your mind is like, thank God. Because this way, now I'm not gonna forget. I have written down that I need to buy X, Y, and Z. So now I've got a reminder. And your mind can just put it to rest so that these thoughts don't pop into your mind as well. So once you lay it to rest, that thought is basically out of your mind. By the way, if you're having trouble sleeping, as another side note, you can just go and write everything that's on your mind. Basically just brain dump and write things down on paper. So that all of these thoughts just running through your mind when you're laying in bed. And you're like, please brain, let me sleep. Once you're like that, just beforehand, before you go to bed, go and write down everything on your mind. Because the more things you can write down, put on paper, the more your mind can put them outside. So that now you have less of these intrusive thoughts when you're trying to sleep. That's something I've just started with myself. I haven't done it long enough to really feel the results for myself, but that's something worth considering. Because apparently it works really, really well. So one final thing with this is that you want to have a deliberate focus. I'll link to another video below this one, and I'll have it at the end of this video as well, where it's about the levels of focus. But it's like this. Let's say you have a few projects. You have A, B, C, D, and maybe even E. Right? If you're productive, because you're working on so many things at once. But now what's going to happen? Because you're actively on a single day working on all of them, now you're working on project A, but now you get a certain idea about project E. And then a thought pops into your mind of a reminder of a to-do list from project C. And then afterwards you switch to task B. But now you're thinking about something you forgot with task A. And you're thinking about what you need to do with project D later. And it becomes this mess of arrows all around. And if this sounds complex, it looks frustrating, again, welcome to your mind. So what you would do to solve this is to have just project A and maybe project B that you're working on at the same time. And one thing I can give you for this is a to not do list. Because a lot of people have this to-do list. To do, right? And you have so many things on there that it becomes overwhelming. You're like, should I do this, this? Overwhelming. So what you would also have is a to not do. These would be projects that you're not going to focus on right now. Maybe after you finished A and B, you can go to the next thing. But just deliberately saying, right now I am in a season where I'm optimizing for my health. Or right now I'm in a season where I'm really advancing my side hustle or my career. And some other things, like maybe just maintaining family relationships or your social life, maybe you put that on the down low. Of course, you're not going to cut everyone out, of course. I'm not talking about that. But maybe it means that you're not actively trying to meet new people or to network or to do X, Y, and Z. Maybe that means that you go to the gym a few times and that you eat decently well to maintain your physique rather than just going hardcore at it to improve it. Because right now you realize I need to focus over here on my career, on my business, on my X, Y, and Z. Whatever is on here. So with your to not do list, what you're literally saying is, these are things that can wait. They're great ideas, I'm not writing them off, but not for now. And the more you can say, nope, it's not gonna do it, the more you can free up your mind, because your mind is not thinking about all of these other projects over here. And when it comes to working in projects, here's something that's really gonna help you get more done with less frustration. And that is, people try to usually divide it like this. So for example, in the morning I'm going to work on project A. In the evening or afternoon I'm going to work on project B. This sounds good in theory, but it's not a good way to divide your workload. Because for example, project A might be some part of ideas when you're brainstorming. It might be some writing. It might be making some images, right? And project B, you've got to do the same things, but it's about a different topic. And what you're doing is your mind, it separates the tasks rather than the topics. So if you are in research mode, do those things together for project A and B. So instead of saying, in the morning I'm going to do these 3 things for project A, and in the afternoon I'm going to do them for project B. What you would say is in the morning I'm going to do my research tasks. So I'm going to come up with ideas for both project A and B, because you're still doing the same thing. You are researching. And then if you need to create images or videos or something creative for both projects, go and batch those tasks of creating images together. Because again, the task of making the images or doing the research or writing, that's the crucial factor to focus on. And the more you can bulk them together, the same task rather than the same project, the more focus you get, because you're not thinking about other tasks. So let me quickly recap what we just covered, because I know it's been a lot. Most important thing, your mind always wants to fill every part of your conscious brain, your thinking capacity. And if it's not filled by the important task, it's going to fill by everything else. So what you can do about this is to fill up more of the space here by making it more challenging, by giving yourself a time constraint, by giving yourself a quality constraint, and by basically creating side missions, right? Like in a video game, you have your main task that you want to do, but you also have do the task in 2 minutes, or make sure that this person survives, or do X, Y, and Z. If you can create something like that for yourself, your task is going to take up more of this space, and because your brain always wants to fill 100%, there is less room for these kinds of distractions. Second thing, multitasking effectively. What this means is doing something that requires your focus, your conscious effort, at the same time as doing something that's automatic, like tapping your foot to the music, or just walking around, or maybe cleaning, if you're listening to something in your ears. So with that, avoid doing switch tasking, where you check your email and then you're searching for information while you're having a conversation, because you're not doing those at the same time, because all of these things require your focus. And what you have to do is you have to go back and forth and 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 back and forth. And it dilutes your focus, your attention. So don't do that. Only go multitasking with something on autopilot combined with something that requires your attention. And then what you just covered there is to eliminate some of those intrusive thoughts. Just write them down. Write them down so that your mind can just have that sigh of relief, because you're not going to forget. So with all your to-do items that pop into your mind, things you forgot, what you need to buy later at the store, all of those things, or maybe the notes you need to prepare for the meeting, all of those things, write them down. Then your mind can just put it to rest, and you can do the same thing before bed with everything that's bothering you, so that you can sleep more soundly as well. Final thing that we just covered is this. Have fewer projects that you're working on at the same time. So only A and B rather than A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Have a to-do list, but also a not-to-do list, where you're saying project C, D, E, and F. I'm not going to work on that for now. All my focus goes towards this. Because otherwise, you still get those intrusive thoughts about all of the other projects while you're working on either A or B. But, like I said, focus is more than just keeping your concentration. There are actually 4 levels of focus. And if you want to learn about how to improve on all 4 levels, go and watch the video on the right side next, after you've given this one a quick thumbs up. And I'll see you right there on that new video.